rejection never feels good. I know in my experience being rejected, especially from something that I feel so called to do, is very, very painful. And when it happens, we question God. Why would he let that happen? Especially after he's spoken something over our lives already. Like, why would he not allow it to happen when we've stepped out in faith? So this is a story of how I overcame my bad feelings about rejection and just being able to move past them and see that the Lord's plan is so much greater than ours. And sometimes we can't see it in the moment, but when we've gotten further down in the story, it just becomes so much clearer. Last May of 2017, I left on a 5-month journey to Zambia, Africa. For the first 3 months, I completed an internship with Poetess International, which I'll leave a link down below if you want to check them out and get some more information on them. I absolutely love Poetess. I've been on 3 trips with them and they're great. You should check them out. Then during the last 2 months, I completed half of my student teaching. I just graduated from college this past December with a degree in music education, so I spent last fall completing my student teaching semester. I first went to Zambia in June of 2014. I had just finished my freshman year of college, and I had never been on a mission trip overseas. This was a mission trip through the music division, so I was really excited to get to know more music people. During that trip, I found out about an internship that Poetess International does in Zambia during the summertime. Through that first experience, I started to feel my heart being stirred, and I spent the whole rest of the summer thinking about it through a lot of prayer and just resting on what I felt like the Lord was calling me to do. I did go ahead and apply for the internship for 2015, and I really felt called to it at the time. And after waiting several weeks, I found out that I was not accepted. I had been rejected for this internship, and I was completely devastated. During that time in my life, it seemed like it was one thing after the other, that things were just going wrong in my life. At the time, that rejection really stung. For the next 1.5 or 2 years, I went through a really dark time in my life. Looking back now, I realize that I wasn't supposed to be in Zambia in 2015 because I needed to experience the things I did in 2015 in order to be where I am today. So when I went to Zambia in June of 2016, the Lord really started to lay on my heart this call to missions. I got to know some of the interns that were interning with Poetess that summer, and the Lord just began to stir in my heart. I wanted to stay longer. I didn't want to leave after 2 weeks. That didn't seem like enough. And at the time, I knew I was supposed to be on the trip that I was on, but I just had this intense yearning to want more. I wanted more of everything that had to do with Zambia. I wanted to be there longer. I wanted to get to know people more. So after returning home from my second trip to Zambia, I began to try and figure out how I was going to get back, and also trying to discern if the Lord was in fact calling me back to Zambia. So throughout the rest of that summer and even into that next fall, which began my senior year of college, the Lord was laying on my heart to apply for the internship with Poetess, as well as applying to student teach there. At the time, I felt like I had to choose one or the other, and I talked with a lot of friends about it. I was praying a lot about it and just wasn't getting any sort of direction in that. Then one day in mid-September, I was sitting in a meeting for all of the music majors, and I could not focus. This entire time, I was just thinking of Zambia and this decision that I had to make, and in the back of my head, I hear this voice say, "Mackenzie, I'm not asking you to choose, I'm telling you to do both." And in that moment, I felt very, very scared. I was like, what? I knew that that voice was God, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is absolutely crazy. We're talking 5 whole months. How is that even gonna work with school? How's it gonna work financially? And I'm sitting there trying to make up all these excuses as to why I can't do both and why I have to choose. But within the next hour or so, I had realized that it wasn't all that crazy and that the timing did seem like it would work out really well. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna pray about this, see how I feel about it in a couple of days. And after a couple of days of just intensely praying and meditating on what I was feeling like I was supposed to do, I remember I sat down one night. It was September 18th, 2016. I was sitting in my room and I was like, all right, God, if you really want me to apply for both the internship and student teaching for a total of 5 months, I need you to speak to me through my devotions right now. Now, I'm not one to typically ask for an immediate answer like that. I had never done something like that. And I open my devotional and it starts talking about David Livingstone, who was a missionary in Africa in the 1900s. And this guy literally discovered Victoria Falls, which is located in Livingstone, Zambia. And I'm sitting there in utter disbelief because the Lord just answered my prayer, just like that. I had just asked him to give me that last bit of assurance that I needed to know that this was what he wanted me to do. And he literally gave me a devotional that told me exactly where I was being called. Still looking back at that, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around because I had never experienced God in such a deep way like that. I had never had an answer to prayer immediately like that. I remember I'm sitting there and my roommate is looking at me like, what's wrong? And for several minutes, not even being able to speak because I'm so overcome with emotions. It was one of the coolest things I've ever experienced in my life. And so I knew after that night that I was supposed to go and I was supposed to be there for both the internship and the student teaching. So when I decided to apply for the internship again for the summer of 2017, not only was I thinking, how in the world would I do both the internship and student teaching, I was also remembering that pain of rejection that I felt when I applied for the internship for 2015. And so I had a lot of hesitancy there and had to work through some of that. That really just came through time, and especially after I read the devotional where God was literally just pointing me to Zambia. There was really just no doubt in my mind. And in that moment, the rejection was healed because I realized the Lord laid the internship on my heart 2 years before I was supposed to even be there. I think sometimes we think when we hear the Lord speak something over our lives, we think it's supposed to be right then and there, when in fact it might not be. That's really hard to discern. I didn't realize it until 2 years later when I went to apply for this internship again. I basically submitted the application. I was like, Lord, this is in your hands. I'm not gonna worry about this. It's out of my control at this point. I've done what I feel like I've been called to do, and we'll just see what happens. Around the same time, I had to make the decision about student teaching. As a student teacher, it's not required to do cross-cultural student teaching where you go overseas somewhere, but this was something the Lord had placed on my heart, and it was an option to do that. So of course I wanted to do it in Zambia, and it really just made sense to do it right after the internship. And I was praying about this a lot, and I actually waited until late the night before the application for student teaching was due. I hadn't looked at the application at all, and I remember sitting down, it was like 10 o'clock at night. I was supposed to have 2 letters of recommendation, one from a pastor, one from someone else like a professor. I had to write like a whole paper about my faith journey. I had to fill out all of this paperwork, and I'm looking at this and I start freaking out because I realize I'm not gonna finish this by the time it's due. It was all my fault that I had waited and procrastinated on it. I stayed up really late working on it, and the next day I skipped a bunch of classes so that I could finish it, and by the Lord's grace, I had enough time to finish it and I turned it in on time. So then the other thing about student teaching, if a student chooses to do cross-cultural student teaching, they will always do that during the second half of the semester. So they have a placement for the first half of the semester that is in the States, and then another placement that is overseas somewhere that they will complete during the second half. They do that so that professors can observe the student teacher before they go overseas, make sure that everything is pretty much squared away. But in order to do what I felt like I was being called to do, I needed to complete my cross-cultural student teaching during the first half of the semester, since I would already be in Zambia for the summer, and then I would switch into student teaching after that. So I had to actually appeal to do that. No one at my school had ever been able to do their cross-cultural student teaching during the first half of the semester. I remember the day that I was accepted to the internship. I had just finished taking a CLEP test for a political government class. Sorry if it's an interest of yours, but it's just not a passion of mine, and I was trying to get out of having to take a class on it and free up my schedule. Well, I go to take this CLEP test and I failed it miserably. I didn't even come close. I just felt like such a failure walking out from taking this test. But at the same time, my phone buzzes and I look down, I have an email. So I go to check my email and it's from Poetis International and it is my acceptance letter into the internship for 2017. And in that moment, all of my feelings of failure just were like gone. They didn't even matter anymore because God was just in that moment. He was just telling me, who cares about politics? You're going to Zambia, be excited about that. I went from a very low point to a very high point very, very fast. It was like in a matter of seconds. So that was just kind of a cool thing that happened. So I got accepted to the internship somewhere in late October to mid-November, but I didn't find out about student teaching until a little while longer. I found out that my appeal had been accepted in late November, early December for student teaching, but I hadn't yet been accepted. So that was promising, but again, it wasn't a for sure thing that I was going to get accepted. And then I found out right before the semester had finished that I was accepted to student teach in Zambia. And in that moment, it was like I was in disbelief, but at the same time, I had known all along that I was going to be accepted because the Lord spoke that in my life. He had already spoken Zambia in my life. He had already confirmed multiple times that I was supposed to be there and that I was supposed to apply for both. It was that moment of, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. And the Lord's plan is actually unfolding before my eyes. So after I was finally accepted to do my student teaching in Zambia, I found out I was supposed to meet with, there's a cross-cultural professor. I never met with him. So I found out you're not supposed to be accepted to cross-cultural student teaching until you've met with him and until he approves it. So when I did finally meet this professor, he was looking at me when I walked up and he's like, I don't remember you from the last meeting. And I was like, well, that's because this is the first time that we've met. And he goes, well, you're not supposed to be accepted until we've met. And he kind of chuckled. And then he said, you must have some great professors that are working on your behalf to get you there because you shouldn't have been accepted. My situation going to Zambia was very different than any of the cross-cultural student teachers that year. One, because I was going the first half of the semester, but also I was going to a place that no one had ever gone before, and my whole placement changed several different times, and I'm just so thankful for the professors that worked with me to create such an amazing student teaching experience because I really shouldn't have been able to stay there just based on the normal protocol of student teaching, but they saw that that was a call that the Lord had placed on my heart and they walked through that with me. The whole experience really taught me that the Lord's timing is so perfect. It is better than we could ever imagine. For me, looking back at that rejection from 2015, I never would have known that the Lord was still going to fulfill that calling 2 years later. Had I have gone in 2015 for that internship, I wouldn't have been able to also do my student teaching over there because I was in the middle of my college years. But because I did the internship in 2017 and because my student teaching semester was the fall of 2017, I was able to be there for 5 whole months instead of being there for 3 or even shorter. It was really hard in the moment being rejected in 2015, but I'm so thankful for that because I just grew a lot in my faith during that season in my life, and I needed that time to kind of figure out who I was and who God says that I am. If you allow God to, He will always turn a negative situation into a positive one. For me, that was redeeming my call to Zambia, and during that dark season, I kind of questioned if I was supposed to go into missions or not. That was really hard for me because it was such an intense calling on my heart, and then I feel like the rug got pulled out from underneath me, and I was really angry at God for that. But through that season of healing, the Lord really just redeemed my heart. He transformed my heart, and He laid that calling back on my heart. I'm just really thankful for that hard season because it allowed me to experience Zambia in such a greater and deeper way. So I just want to encourage you that if you're in a place in your life right now where you are asking God why He won't give you something or let you go somewhere that He's already spoken over your life, just rest in knowing that the time isn't now, but it will come. You just have to be faithful and walk humbly with Him because His timing is so perfect and He wants to give you the best experience possible. Thank you guys for listening. I hope that my story was encouraging to you today, and I can't wait to talk to you again soon. Bye.